The Custer's 7th Cavalry survivor, Jacob Adams, reveals rain-in-the-face experience during the Battle of Little Bighorn. On April 13, 1873, I signed up duty in Yankton, South Dakota, with Company H of the 7th United States Cavalry. We were then transferred to Fort Lincoln, covering a trek of approximately 500 miles. There, we prepared for the Yellowstone expedition. This video will uncover what really happened that day at the mysterious Battle of Little Bighorn. Before we continue, please like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. We engaged in a direct skirmish with the Indians near the Yellowstone River in the face on August 4th. We were 75 miles away when we arrived at the agency on Ration Day, and General Custer dispatched 50 men, led by Captain Tom Custer, to apprehend Rain, Montana, which led to the deaths of 2 civilians, including Dr. Hansinger. The veteran of Scout that a Sioux chief by the name of Rain in the Face was billeting at Standing Rock Agency, the 7th Cavalry, and Mr. Ballerin, both of whom had deviated somewhat from the main group because they were interested in studying the plant life in the unfamiliar area. During the winter of 1874, the 7th Cavalry was stationed at Fort Abraham Lincoln, and General Custer received word from a large Sioux gathered. We didn't know Rain in the Face, but a scout gave Captain Custer a description of him and told us that he had just entered the store. Captain Custer and a few women were free from Jai, and Rain in the Face took advantage of the situation to escape. While in custody, Rain in the Face later managed to break a purchase with 2 civilians who were also imprisoned alongside the Sioux murderer. There was a lot of Indians, but no one was armed, and Rain in the Face had formed a close friendship with a private soldier who went straight to the store and captured Rain in the Face while he was at the counter, ensuring he was taken safely to the guardhouse at Fort Abraham Lincoln to face charges of murder and minor garrison offense. This soldier regularly gave Rain in the Face tobacco and other favors. I mention this because in the spring of 1876, an expedition was organized at Fort Abraham Lincoln, which is the headquarters of the 7th Cavalry. I served as a member of this unit. We traveled from because it was close to another incident involving the massacre. After his escape, Rain in the Face joined Sitting Bull, the chief of the hostile Sioux. Yellowstone and Bighorn expedition, led by the courageous General George A. Lincoln, to the Powder River, traveling 500 miles and setting up camp there for a while. During a scouting mission when we were stationed at this camp, Major Reno and 6 other companies uncovered a substantial Indian trail. He promptly returned to alert General Terry, our commanding officer, regarding the discovery. General Terry set up a pack train by bugle call. After inspecting the Indian camp and assessing the situation, Captain Tom Custer ordered us to march 28 miles on the 24th. That evening, all fires were extinguished, and there were no Captain McDougal, an Apache scout named Charles Reynolds, and a half-breed Sioux scout who were looking for 2 soldiers from each company of the 7th Cavalry to make up the team. The next day, June 23rd, we resumed our journey and covered a distance of roughly 33 miles. I was a part of this detail, serving under Captain McDougal. On the morning of the 22nd, we prepared our mules, broke camp around noon, and traveled roughly 12 miles, had defected from the hostiles to join Custer, and returned to report to General Custer. There was a rumor among the soldiers that Sitting Bull had placed 100 horses on the scale of this half-breed defector. It was also said that this same half-breed had a location, citing the large number of Indians. Nevertheless, Custer dismissed him as a coward and never returned, whether alive or dead. I vividly recall the first bugle call on the morning of this brave scout, Mitch Bowie, who accompanied Custer's contingent O5 companions until the 25th. It marked the officers' assembly and was the first bugle call since our departure. It strongly advised General Custer against attacking Sitting Bull at that specific time and from the Powder River 3 days earlier. As for the specifics, I can never forget them. General Custer's commanding presence was truly remarkable. Even with these orders, I cannot say, but the scene left an indelible impression on me. I can now picture him standing there, a figure of admiration for all of us. General Custer retained Companies C, E, F, I, and L, along with their gear and band for himself. He then proceeded to organize his troops into 3 battalions as follows. Companies A, G, and M were assigned to Major Reno. The remaining companies D, H, and K were entrusted to F.W. Benton, who was the captain of Company H and held the rank of brevet colonel at the time. General Custer led the charge with the riverbank. The bluff presented a natural obstacle for cavalry due to its steep, rocky sides. As she passed the other soldiers, he exclaimed, "Come with me, and tonight we'll relax on his 5 companies, setting the pace for the attack." Raising his hat in response to the onset of the Indian camp, the command quickly formed in the wake of Custer's advance, with Major Reno's robes on the far side of the timber and just ahead of a sturdy bluff stretching roughly 5 miles parallel to the trailing behind. The final mile of this stretch leading up to the head of the village was fully visible to the Indians. With this clear warning of his approach, the Indians had ample time to concentrate at the lower and farthest end of the Indian encampment, which was approximately 7 of their forces against Custer's battle, which they probably did. The distance from where the troops split to the spot where Custer aimed to for the river was miles. According to my own observations, it appears that the general was attacked in the area between the small rise and the ford, where they made their final stand. It is clear that the troops were shaken by the first volley and withdrew from the ford to the hills approximately 300 yards behind. The ground of the ford, as shown by numerous dead horses in the river, indicated that no soldiers had been made, either singly or in small groups, 5 or 6. I found General Custer on this little barren yellow rise, surrounded by a ring of the band's shoes, which he had probably shot to make a makeshift barricade. Captain Custer, Boston Custer, whose Arvidas were the expedition's forage master, and the assistant General Cook were with him. General Custer had 2 wounds, one above his left eye, near the temple, and one in the right side of his ischia. He had not been scalped or otherwise mutilated, with the exception of a single lee gash on his neck that was about 4 inches long and appeared to have been inflicted after his death. Blood was still leaking from the cut, dripping down his face and mustache, even getting into his mouth. Captain Tom Custer's body was badly mutilated, stripped, and bare, save for his stockings. Adjutant Cook, who was well known for his lengthy side whips, also had his whips cut off, along with other gory mutilations. Except for one private soldier who had shown kindness by rubbing his face when the chief was imprisoned at Fort Abraham Lincoln, all the other soldiers suffered the same fate, being stripped, scalped, and disfigured, and his body remained untouched, save for the movement of his coat, which was placed carefully over his face as if to protect it from the sun. With only 2 exceptions, the entire command of free companies met a tragic end in the command around 9 o'clock on the night of the 25th, causing quite a stir. I believe that Rain in the Face came to the battlefield and ordered the Indians not to harm this massacre. One exception was a Crow Indian scout named Curley, who arrived at Benteen's soldier's body. I also believe that if he had seen this soldier, his life would have been spared. We initially thought he would bring news from Custer, but when our interpreters questioned him, the exception was General Custer's orderly bugler, John Martin, who was sent back to Benteen with no way of knowing whether Custer had survived. Many soldiers thought Curley had never really been in the battle, but had fed at the first hint of trouble at the ford. The other was a dispatch. He told the soldiers that when he left Custer's side, they were still within sight of the Indians. These were the only 2 people from the entire command who escaped the order. In addition, I believe that the Indians engaged General Custer in foot combat. Shortly after that, I saw Indians fighting us while wearing the white stable uniforms of Massacre, and neither of them saw the battle. I'm proud of all the men in General Custer's Our Boys. They even rode on the ridges, boldly playing the band instruments. Our battalion came to an end at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because there was only one dead Indian pony in the entire battlefield. It's sad that any sense of order vanished after the initial chaos, as it appears that the squaws arranged it that way. The Indian children went ahead and shot on the morning of the 25th, and Major Reno's troops had to cover roughly 5 miles to reach the fort on the left side of the village. They were aiming to synchronize with Custer's arrival at the fort on the left, where the opposing fallen soldiers from all companies were scattered around without any order. These soldiers, 5 or 30 of them from each company in the battalion, were simply outnumbered and overwhelmed. I witnessed a row of fallen soldiers, about 20 of them full of arrows after the massacre. Reno's men faced an open stretch after crossing the river without incident, but the situation became so chaotic that the order eventually came for each man's own ends. Troops and Indians found themselves in a desperate situation, and when the Indians unleashed a second volley, they were ordered to mount again. However, he commanded his men to dismount. The horses stopped Anik and retreated uncontrollably as they charged across this barrage of Indian ire, and when they entered the wooded area, they were met with a devastating hand-to-hand battle. Troopers were lassoed from their horses and dragged into the center of the village, where they could do whatever it took to save them. Bentaine's battalion moved toward the center, covering a tree that was tied to trees and burned that night, making it visible to their fellow soldiers from Bentaine's division. As a result, it brought along the pack train, which had been positioned roughly a mile behind the center. Bentaine's soldiers saw the dire circumstances of Reno's men, and only a small number of Reno's courageous soldiers were able to escape the deadly ambush across the river and arrive at Bentaine's position. As these tragic events transpired, I was at the pack train, which was about a mile from Bentaine's presence. Despite command, Reno's command would have suffered the same fate as Custer's. After an hour or so, we were told to join Benin. Captain McDougall said, "Back your horse, Adams, or you'll get yourself killed." I obeyed him, but I could also tell us that if the battle was still going on when we arrived, we should form our own separate company. There was a brief pause in the fighting when we arrived at Benin's battalion. I rode up to the crest of the hill to survey the valley below when Captain Benin yelled, "Pull, see the Indians just beyond the hill, lying as densely as possible on the ground." It was around 1 p.m. when we arrived at Benin's position. We could clearly hear intense gunfire coming from the right at that time, presumably from a ridge that resembled a railroad embankment. After a quick discussion among the officers, we immediately set out to locate the urgent need to assume a defensive stance. We were told to retreat to our previous position, Custer, and we did so for no more than half a mile until we came across a group of Indians who were relying in ambush just beyond this ridge. We recognized the time between 2 and 3 o'clock, which coincided with the departure from the right. One company offered cover for our withdrawal. As soon as the Indians realized our intention that evening, it was my first time being under such intense fire. By 5 o'clock, the majority of the men were at our lines, and the fighters fought fiercely from all directions, not stopping until about 8 o'clock had fallen. My bunkmate, George Lell, was severely wounded and frantically pleaded for water. As retreat, they started closing in on us from all directions, forcing the last company to retreat with the other injured men. At 5 o'clock, volunteers were called in to fetch water from the river, ensure everyone's safety, and tend to the injured. On my day, I was about to enter the Theravine with my hidden. One by one, we swarmed across, filled our keddies from the river, and then hurried back to the far side, so I stepped forward. Carrying our camp kettles, several of us descended a small ravine, shielded from the Indians' gunfire. At the end of the ravine, there was a narrow open space of about 30 yards, directly facing the woods where Reno's men had suffered a great year earlier in the day, and where the Indians laid ket of water. I felt jolt, and upon inspection, I found a bullet with pierced it. I had to get a new kettle and go again, but I was able to witness a group of Indians moving stealthily along a ridge higher than our position. We stayed up until about 4 o'clock that morning, on the morning of the 26th. On the evening of the 25th, fighting ceased after 8 o'clock, and I continued to suffer alongside my comrade, quench his thirst before his passing, which happened at around 10 o'clock, and opened fire on him, starting a fierce battle along the whole front. Continued unabated until around 9 o'clock in the morning, when the Indians left where we were waiting for the next development. Despite the intense hand-to-hand fighting that broke out, the Indians eventually changed and showed incredible determination in seemingly endless numbers. It looked like the worst of circumstances, but Captain Bentane ordered a charge and retreated to their previous position. Our unit also had a few yards below the ridge's crest, and tent mate Thomas Meadows of West Virginia was struck by a serious wound in his right breast. I tried to carry my wounded comrade back over the ridge, but he was struck by another bullet around 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 26th, and the Indians started to ease off on their firing head, instantly ending his life. I had to let go of his body and run for cover. Glancing back, I was filled with disgust, and I can tell you that Indians never dared to try such a thing again. We saw an Indian holding a long stick with feathers, trying to reach Meadows's body, and we could see them beginning to pack up as if they were getting ready to leave. There were occasionally tray shots until the sun went down, but we paid close attention to them. The terrain on which our unit made its final stand was unusual. We were positioned in a large area where the Indians might return to fight us to the last man after moving their women and children to the basin with our horses in the center. We laid on the ridgetops along the outside of the basin as the Indians surrounded us and attacked from all directions. The company suffered more casualties than the other companies, and there was only one shovel among us. Because we thought it would be safe, we started to build breastworks as nightfall. However, they never returned, probably because their scouts had discovered that General Terry was where Custer was. But they missed him as they passed through the former Indian village. Our men greeted him with loud cheers and hat-waving, but when he attempted to reply, he led a squad from there toward the last known location of Custer's command, but on the opposite side of the river. They passed close. We transported our wounded across the river to the commands of Generals Gibbon and Terry, approaching. Early on the morning of the 27th, Generals Cherry and Gibbon arrived from the choked-up, sobbed, and broke down. Until then, Custer's fate remained a mystery. As a squad from the remaining 7th Cavalry rode toward the last known whereabouts of Custer, we traversed the bluffs and soon came across horses. We were then divided up, each of us attempting to solve the mystery. Riding somewhat apart from the others and closer to each other, I spotted a small hill covered with dead white. The entire unit soon gathered at the tragic sight, but a few words were exchanged. The only survivor amidst the carnage was Comanche, Captain Keogh's beloved horse. As I approached it, I found the mortal remnant of the brave Custer. Signing to Captain Bentane, he quickly joined me. "Captain, here's General Custer," I told him. "That sure looks like General Custer," he said regretfully. He was sitting on his hindquarters with his front feet touching the ground as we got closer. A couple of us dismounted and helped him stand, but he slipped away, leaving him weak. That evening, this magnificent old horse, who was supposed to be well known, made his way into the camp despite being peppered with bullets. He was taken to Terry's unit steamboat and taken east with the wounded soldiers. The fallen soldiers from different units were laid to rest wherever they were discovered, and every officer from Custer's unit was given a dignified burial. But when I returned to the battlefield 2 years later, I saw the remains of the dead spread in the sun, their bodies excavated by coyotes and feet. Thanks for watching.